Welcome to our coverage of the Noor Salman trial here on clickorlando.com. I'm Lisa Bell. Today, the Pulse gunman's mother and sister testified before the jury. Federal prosecutors are trying to prove that Salman covered up her husband's plan. Today, jurors saw final text messages sent between Noor Salman and Omar Mateen. We also saw internet search histories leading up to the shooting. While on the stand, Mateen's family members were questioned about what they knew days before the attack. Let's get out to News 6 investigator Mike DeForest. He's been at the courthouse all day. And Mike, federal prosecutors are expected to rest their case by tomorrow.
They've had a lot of evidence that they presented to this jury, but it looks like the government could be wrapping up with the defense beginning on Monday. A bulk of today's testimony was from FBI analysts who looked at Omar Mateen's cell phone and Noor Salman's cell phone. As you know, cell phones contain a lot of information, not only about who we call, what text messages we send, but also our internet web histories. And so we were able to really explore both of them and what they were doing in the days and hours leading up to the Pulse nightclub attack. And one of the key text messages that the government highlighted today was one that Noor Salman sent to Omar Mateen on the day of the Pulse nightclub attack. She sent it at about 5:50 at night. He didn't receive it till about 7:30 that night. We're talking just about 6 or 8 hours before the Pulse attack. In that text message, Noor Salman writes, quote, "If your mom calls, say Nemo invited you out and Noor wants to stay home." Now, the government suggests that this text message is important because it suggests that Noor Salman planted a cover story to her husband, gave him this cover story, a cover story which Omar Mateen then repeated by calling his mom and saying, "Hey, I'm out with my friend Nemo." None of that was true, but that's what the government says was part of Noor Salman's role in helping her husband. We are joined by attorney Whitney Bone. We've talked a lot about this quote. Just your thoughts on the importance of this to the government's case of showing that she aided and abetted Omar Mateen.
Sure. I mean, part of their case and part of their theory of how she aided and abetted him is that she helped him come up with this story. They've got other theories in terms of, that she helped him go buy guns and ammunition, or that she helped him spend money prior to the attack. However, this particular line that they're going down implies that, not only did she know this was going to happen, but that she went to the extreme of helping him come up with a cover so that he could conceal what he was doing. If the jury buys that in terms of the government's theory, that's huge, because that in and of itself, if some jurors buy that that's what was actually happening, could be enough to convict her of this offense.
Now, the defense in opening statements really tries to flip this statement on its head and not suggest that it's something nefarious, but that in Noor Salman's mind, she allegedly thought that her husband really was out with this buddy named Nemo. And when you read it in that context, it's almost like she's telling her husband, "Hey, tell your mom the truth. If your mom calls, tell her the truth. Say Nemo invited you out and that I want to stay home."
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all know, any of us who engage in text messaging, especially with significant others, you lose tone in text. You don't have the context. You have words in writing. What you don't have is the tone, and it can often be misunderstood. And in this case, certainly, I think the defense has a very fair argument that what you have in these texts is simply Noir's telling him to tell Mateen to tell his mother, Noir wanted to stay home because she wanted to stay home, and she wanted to defend the fact that she wanted to stay home to his mother. It could be taken that way. It could be taken to mean really she believed that he was going to dinner with Nemo and she didn't want to go, So certainly.
And another interpretation that the defense has thrown around is that she was saying, "I don't want to tell her, Omar. You tell your
She's
mom
your mom
where you're at." Exactly, and that's
She's
another
your mom,
tone they're trying to show.
Exactly, and the dynamics between a son and his mother, who's no doubt concerned about the tone of the relationship between Noir and Omar Mateen, could be a part of this as well, in terms of her saying, "You explain to your mom that I'm not going because I don't want to." There's a lot of explanations for this, so I'm not sure that, absent the government putting forth evidence that Noir Salman said, when you go do an attack on a club or when you go do some terrorist act, make sure you say you're out to dinner with Nemo, that they can really necessarily get quite there. But they are allowed to prove this case by circumstantial evidence, and a jury may find that that's enough.
Now, one of the key witnesses we heard from today was Omar Mateen's mom. Keep in mind, the mother of a man who's been told murdered 49 people at the Pulse nightclub. One of the things she testified about was on the afternoon, a couple hours before the Pulse nightclub attack, she did in fact receive a phone call from her son, Omar Mateen. This was shortly after Mateen receives the text message from his wife saying, "Call your mom, tell her you're with Nemo." Mateen reportedly did call his mom, said, "Hey, I'm out with Nemo." Now, she later acknowledged that she learned that was a lie, and she said she was very upset by that. She said she was embarrassed that she was told this lie.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's my understanding that even in trial today, when she testified, you know, she looked at Miss Salman and cried. You know, I mean, this is very overwhelming.
It's her daughter-in-law.
It's her daughter-in-law. It's the mother of her grandchild. You know, this is very difficult, the situation she's been put in on so many levels. I can't even imagine. You know, this is so difficult for the victims in this case, but this is a woman who seemingly has done absolutely nothing wrong and has had to watch while this all happens, and now had to testify in court in front of a jury about it.
And it was clear that the government brought in Omar Mateen's mom to show that reportedly Noor Salman gave this directive to her husband, "Tell your mom this," and that the mom saying, "Yes, that's what my son," kind of connecting the dots between Noor Salman and giving this cover story. However, during cross-examination, the defense was able to use Noor Salman's mother-in-law to paint a picture of Noor being this very caring mother who loved children, who was very careful around children, and in the mother's words, was a very simple person. Someone who the mother-in-law had to tell Noor Salman reportedly, "You need to mature, you need to grow up," and really kind of humanized Noor Salman as being this very simple, low IQ person, which the defense is trying to paint her as.
Absolutely, and I think that we should expect to hear maybe a little bit more about this in the defense's case in chief, but certainly they've used this government witness to their advantage in terms of starting to portray that. You know, that's been a huge part of what they've argued even prior to the trial in terms of her statement and the influence that having her interrogated by 10 hours by law enforcement without the benefit of an attorney, you know, when you evaluate situations like that as a court of law, you take the defendant as they come. In other words, if she's of a lower level intelligence or lower average end, that's relevant to the facts and circumstances she was faced with and how she reacted in that situation. It's certainly also relevant to what effect her dynamic with Mateen would have been or had on her with regard to what she would have known or not known, or what she would have questioned him about, in terms of even if he did say something that made her concerned, was she in a position to really question it in a way to even really understand that there was a terrorist act that was going to take place, or did she just think something was odd and not have the fortitude to question it because that was their dynamic and she was a simple person? That's going to be the defense's case, I'd expect.
Now, another big thing that came out today was Omar Mateen's internet history that was on his cell phone. The government was able to show in the weeks leading up to the Pulse attack, he visited a lot of ISIS websites, read a lot of news articles about ISIS, watched videos calling for terrorist attacks during Ramadan, which was happening during that month of June, and that he was also researching guns. He was researching how to get his finances in order. And part of the reason I think the government wanted to show this was because during Noor Salman's statement to the FBI, she said, "I witnessed my husband as he watched videos of beheadings. He went to this particular website called LiveLeak." And the government was able to show, yep, look on his phone here. He went to this website that Noor Salman told us about.
Right. I mean, certainly we've already seen it prior to the trial with the government's trial briefs that they filed, that there's a big issue here in terms of what Noor Salman told the FBI purportedly. We don't have a recording of it, but per their testimony and what's written in the statement that they said they transcribed that she gave, and then what's inconsistent about that, or what's consistent about that with other evidence that they've been able to glean. So in this situation, they corroborated that he looked at these violent images and these beheadings and things of that nature with the forensic evidence. But on the other hand, you can expect the defense to probably very much harp on the fact that Noor Salman supposedly told the FBI during her statement that she went with him to scout out the Pulse nightclub prior to this terrorist attack. And that just didn't happen. I mean, that is refuted, and neither party's disputing that, including the government. that's refuted by the forensic evidence here. So it's interesting in terms of what they're linking up, but then what they're maybe going to have to be ready to defend when the defense puts on their case.
And another part of what Noor Salman said in her statement was that I witnessed my husband as he looked at the Pulse nightclub website, or a website about Pulse. And when this one particular FBI forensic examiner was on the stand, the defense asked him, hey, did the government ever ask you to look for the word Pulse in Omar Mateen's prior history? And he said, I wasn't asked to look for that, which means the government had already seen the data and know that he had not searched that, at least on his phone today.
Right. They didn't want another witness who was going to be able to say maybe that he'd looked for it and not found it when they already knew that it wasn't there.
And why that's important in the defense case is because the defense is basically saying if Omar Mateen did not even know what he was going to target until that night, they're suggesting he chose Pulse the night of the shooting. Then if he didn't know where he was going, how could Noor Salman know?
Absolutely. And it appears that empirically the evidence that's forensic in this case, the digital evidence, supports the idea at least that either he didn't look into it ahead of time, or that if he did, there's no evidence of it that the government can put forth.
Well, this one FBI internet or information technology specialist, he's going to be back on the stand tomorrow morning. The government expects to wrap up their case tomorrow. The jury will have Friday off, and then on Monday we begin hearing the defense's side of things. So, Attorney Whitney Bone, thank you so much. We really appreciate your insight into this. Thanks. I know you'll be joining us throughout the rest of this trial. Absolutely. And we're going to send it back to you guys.
All right, Mike, thank you. And you can get complete coverage, including our team's minute-by-minute tweets from inside the courthouse. Just go to clickorlando.com/Noor Salman trial. And join us tomorrow morning for another discussion. Our coverage will begin at 8:30 right here on clickorlando.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Lisa Bell.